My name is Daniel Harris, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I've been the kind of guy who works hard in silence, believing that effort, persistence, and discipline would eventually speak louder than anything else. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room. But I was dependable. The guy who stayed late, who triple-checked details, and who made sure projects actually got finished. But the problem with being dependable in a competitive corporate world is that sometimes people don't see your loyalty or your effort. Sometimes the loudest voices drown you out, and sometimes someone will look at you not as a teammate, but as a stepping stone for their own ambition. And that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't know it at the time, but my career, the one I had built with sweat and endless hours, was about to become the battlefield for someone else's greed. And my quiet, meticulous personality, that was about to become the weapon I used against them. But before we get into how I ended up taking someone's career from right under their feet, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop it down in the comments, because I love seeing how far our community of revenge seekers has spread across the world. And while you're here, join our growing community of revenge stories. You're not going to want to miss what's coming next. Now, back to the story. When I first met Claire Jennings, she was magnetic. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and instantly command attention without even trying. She was confident, charismatic, and she knew exactly how to work a crowd. People adored her charm, and upper management couldn't get enough of her energy. She joined our company as a senior project manager, and right from the start, I noticed how different she was from me. Where I was quiet, she was bold. Where I believed in letting results speak, she believed in making sure everyone heard about her contributions, loudly and often. At first, I admired her confidence. She was the kind of person I thought I could learn from, someone who had mastered the art of visibility in a world that often rewarded flash over substance. But admiration turned to suspicion, and then to anger, when I started noticing a disturbing pattern. Projects I worked on late into the night. Proposals I carefully crafted, running numbers and making sure every detail was solid. Creative solutions I brainstormed when no one else wanted to take on the extra work. Somehow they started finding their way into Claire's presentations. She wasn't stealing files directly. She was cleverer than that. She'd hover around during brainstorming meetings, taking notes on what others suggested. And when I'd share my fully fleshed out concepts with her in private, thinking I was collaborating, she'd quietly absorb every detail, polish it with her smooth presentation skills, and then present it to leadership as her own brilliance. At Haiti, first, I told myself I was imagining it. I didn't want to believe someone could be so calculated. I convinced myself that maybe we just thought alike, or maybe it was coincidence. But then came the day that changed everything. The day she stole the one project I had poured months of my life into. And when the CEO stood up in front of the entire company and publicly praised Claire for the groundbreaking work she had led, my blood turned to ice. That was my work, my hours, my life. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. If I didn't do something, she wouldn't just steal my work. She would steal my career, my future, and everything I had fought so hard to build. What Claire didn't realize was that she had underestimated me. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Silent doesn't mean blind. And patience doesn't mean I wouldn't strike back. I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to take her entire career. When I walked out of that meeting, my project paraded around as Claire's genius. I didn't storm off in anger. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice. No. I went back to my desk, sat down, and opened my notebook. And in that notebook, I wrote one single sentence. Claire Jennings will never get away. With this, it wasn't rage driving me anymore. Rage is messy. Rage blinds you. What I felt was something sharper, cold, precise. The kind of clarity that only comes when you realize you've been played for a fool, and the only way forward is to turn the entire game against your opponent. Because here's the thing, I knew Claire's type. She thrived on the spotlight, but she was lazy beneath the polish. She had no patience for details, no endurance for the grind. She needed people like me to do the heavy lifting in the shadows so she could swoop in and collect the praise. Without someone feeding her, she had nothing. And once I understood that, I knew exactly where to start. The first step was simple: starve her of material. I stopped sharing ideas casually in meetings. I stopped emailing her drafts. When she hovered around my desk fishing for updates, I'd smile politely, shrug, and tell her things were still in progress. If she pressed, I'd deliberately feed her incomplete thoughts, half-baked concepts that sounded promising but fell apart under scrutiny. At first, she didn't notice. She still strutted into presentations, all confidence and charm, sprinkling in fragments of what I had shared with her. But without the backbone of my actual work, the cracks started showing. Executives began asking follow-up questions. Numbers didn't add up. Timelines didn't match. And Claire, so good at faking certainty, squirmed when she couldn't provide answers. I watched from the back of the room, my expression neutral, as she stumbled through explanations. No one looked at me, but I could feel the silent shift in the room. Doubt was starting to creep in, but starving her wasn't enough. If I wanted to take her career, I had to set a trap. So I crafted a project, a decoy. Something flashy enough to tempt her, but flawed in ways only I would notice. It was a proposal for a new client strategy, filled with surface-level brilliance, but riddled with hidden pitfalls. If someone actually tried to implement it, it would collapse spectacularly. And I made sure Claire got her hands on it. I accidentally left the file open on my screen during lunch. I left a printed copy on my desk, highlighted as if it was my prized idea. Sure enough, within a week, Claire was parading the plan in front of leadership, presenting it as her revolutionary approach. I sat in silence, nodding, pretending to take notes while every word she spoke pulled her closer to the cliff I'd built beneath her feet. But I didn't stop there. While Claire was busy selling the poisoned plan, I was working quietly in the background. I created an alternative, the real solution. Solid numbers, airtight strategies, realistic timelines. I documented every step meticulously, but I didn't show it to anyone yet. Because timing was everything, I needed the executives to watch her crash. I needed them to see, with their own eyes, that she was incapable of delivering without someone else propping her up. And when that moment came, I'd step forward, not with vengeance in my tone, but with calm, professional certainty. And when I did, there would be no coming back for her. I'll never forget the day it all unraveled. Claire stood at the head of the conference table, dressed in her sharpest suit, her voice brimming with confidence as she unveiled her grand strategy. But as the questions started coming, where did these numbers come from? What happens if this projection fails? Why wasn't risk management addressed? Her polished smile started to falter. She stammered, she bluffed, she improvised. But the more she spoke, the clearer it became. She didn't understand her own plan. And then, the CEO turned his gaze toward me. "Daniel," he said slowly, "you've been quiet. What do you think of this proposal?" I could feel Claire's eyes burning into me. She knew in that instant that I held the knife. I closed my notebook, leaned forward, and said calmly, "With all due respect, I believe the plan as presented has some critical flaws, but I've been working on an alternative that addresses those issues." And just like that, the room shifted. Every head turned toward me. Every doubt they had about Claire crystallized in a single moment. I didn't expose her directly. I didn't accuse her of theft. I didn't need to. I simply laid out my work, clean, precise, undeniable. And as I spoke, I watched the executives lean in, nodding, scribbling notes. Their excitement grew with every word. Claire sat frozen, her face pale, her smile brittle. And I knew then that this was only the beginning, because I wasn't just taking back my work. I was dismantling her credibility piece by piece, and soon she wouldn't have a career left to stand on. After that meeting, the tide shifted almost overnight. The executives were no longer dazzled by Claire's polished speeches. They had tasted the difference between empty performance and real substance. And once you see the cracks in a facade, you can never unsee them. But I didn't stop at just that one meeting. No, that was merely the first blow. Revenge isn't about one strike. It's about pressure. Quiet, steady pressure that builds until your target collapses under their own weight. I began to isolate her, brick by brick. When teams asked me for clarification, I stopped funneling information through Claire. I gave direct, detailed answers to colleagues, CCing managers in every email. Slowly, everyone began bypassing her. The authority she had once stolen dissolved into thin air, and she didn't even realize it until she was no longer in the loop. Next, I began documenting everything, every file, every timeline, every version of my work. And I left a digital trail so clear that even a child could see who the real contributor was. I didn't accuse her of plagiarism outright. Instead, I let the evidence sit, quiet but irrefutable, until the day it would be needed. Then came the breaking point. One of our biggest clients had taken interest in the strategy Claire had pitched, the poisoned plan I'd crafted as bait. They wanted to see progress. They wanted results. And Claire, scrambling to save face, tried to push the half-baked mess forward. It imploded. Timelines failed. Budgets ballooned. Deliverables slipped. And when the client grew furious, demanding answers, Claire's excuses crumbled. That's when leadership turned to me again. "Daniel," the CEO said, his voice low, almost weary, "do you know what went wrong here?" And in that moment, I laid everything bare. Calmly. Professionally. I explained the flaws in the original strategy, the risks that had been ignored, and then, like a magician revealing the real trick, I presented my airtight alternative. The room was silent. Then, one by one, the executives nodded. The client, who had been ready to walk away, leaned forward, visibly impressed. By the end of that call, not only was the client back on board, they were more enthusiastic than ever. Had saved the deal. Claire had nearly destroyed it, and everyone knew it. The fallout was brutal. Claire was called into a private meeting with HR and the executive board. I wasn't in the room, but I didn't need to be. The look on her face when she walked out said everything. The sharp, arrogant smirk she once carried was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. Within a week, an email went out. Effective immediately, Claire Jennings is no longer with the company. Just like that, her reign ended. But the story didn't end there. Corporate gossip spreads like wildfire, and word of Claire's downfall traveled fast. Other firms heard about the client fiasco. Whispers of her idea theft trickled out too, because, of course, I had made sure the right people found the right documents at the right time. Her reputation was poisoned. The very connections she once relied on now kept their distance. Doors that had once swung wide open slammed shut. She had built her entire career on stolen work, but without someone to steal from, she had nothing left. And I made sure the entire industry knew it. As for me, I didn't just get recognition. I was promoted. My name was finally tied to the projects I had labored over in silence. The executives who had once ignored me now sought my input directly. And when they asked me to lead the department Claire once ruled, I accepted without hesitation. Because here's the truth. Revenge isn't just about destroying someone else. It's about reclaiming your own story. Claire thought she could erase me by stealing my work. Instead, I erased her career by making sure she could never take credit again. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, methodical, professional. It's the kind that leaves your enemies staring at the ruins of everything they once had, knowing you were the one who pulled the strings all along.